Reflexes. They surprise us because the information never gets to our brain before action happens, but it's important to protect our body from harm. Hi, today's lesson is a very short lesson on the reflex arc. So, the reflex arc is the simplest neural pathway since reflexes are automatic responses to sensory stimuli that occur without brain stimulation or brain input. They're involuntary rather than voluntary. And they involve part of the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. But the impulse from a reflex arc, the sensory information, never makes its way to our brain, which is why they happen so quickly. So, the pathway of neurons that are involved in this um, autonomic response are known as a reflex arc. So, when we look at the components of a reflex arc, we are going to look at the knee jerk reflex. So, the first one that we see is the stimulus. So the stimulus is when the rubber hammer strikes the tendon just below the knee. Our receptor in our body is going to be a stretch receptor in the quadricep muscle. The third component is the sensory neuron. So this is a unipolar neuron attached to the stretch receptor that takes information to the central nervous system. The intraneuron in the central nervous system is going to pass the message to the motor neuron from the associated sensory neuron. So it's going to turn that message from a sensory message into a motor message. And that motor neuron takes that message away from the central nervous system to the peripheral nervous system and affects an action. So the knee is tapped, that sensory receptors detect a stretch. That gets sent to the central nervous system in the spinal cord, where the interneurons send a message back to the motor neurons, and the lower leg jerks forward because the quadricep was instructed to contract. And then the last step in this process would be the effector, which is the muscle or quadricep that contracts in response to that information. Oh, no neurons are connected to the brain, so the brain has no role in this response. It only really finds about it after it's occurred through other sources, such as kinetic response or through visual information. We don't notice the brain wasn't involved because these reflexes occur so fast. The command to kick the knee is given um, before we feel the blow of the hammer on our knee. And this type of reflex is very protective. So we don't want to keep our hand on a hot place long enough to feel the pain. Our body actually removes that hand before we ever feel any pain. So that was our lesson on the reflex arc. Take time to review if needed, and I'll catch you again next time. Bye.